What's up, everybody? It's Lieutenant Atterbury back at it again with another Lobo Pack podcast episode. Today, we have the awesome Captain Locke, APMS Intel Officer. Sir, it's an honor to have you on the podcast and just to hear your story and what you've done for the program so far. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've seen other people come on, and these podcasts have been great. I was kind of jealous you didn't pick me earlier, but now we can finally get on and have this conversation.
Definitely. So, just starting off, where do you come from, and what's your sort of origin story, sir?
So, I grew up in Massachusetts, Sharon, Massachusetts, which is right next door to Foxborough. So, any football fans know that's where the stadium is. Grew up in Massachusetts, not a real strong military presence there. So when I decided that I was being called to serve, I didn't really have a good path for myself because no one really from my town had done military service. So I kind of blazed my own trail and ended up picking ROTC. Okay.
So you said called to serve. Did you have any relatives that served, and that's what sort of motivated you, or what motivated you to go through ROTC?
Yeah. So both my grandfathers fought in World War II. My mom's dad was an intelligence officer for the Army Air Corps in North Africa, and then my dad's dad was a doctor, so he was a flight surgeon on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific. But you know, I feel like lots of people's grandparents fought in World War II or Vietnam, depending on when you came up. For me, I was looking for something to continue on discipline, because when I was a kid and throughout high school, I did lots of martial arts, and a big part of that was waking up every morning, doing a workout early in the morning, going in the evening and doing your training or whatever you're doing. And I was like scared that I was going to get a freshman 15 because I was going to go to college and not have anything to push me to be the best me that I could be. So I was really drawn towards discipline and physical fitness and being around other people who had that same sort of calling and not falling into the pitfall of hanging out only with people who want to drink every weekend or never want to work out or are just going to be lazy throughout school. So that was one of the things that cued me on to military service, was like, hey, they have to work out every day. That's something that I am already doing that I would like to have someone force me to continue doing. So.
Okay, so did you go to, what schools did you apply for getting out of college? Did you go to UPenn immediately?
Yes. So, coming out of high school, I, throughout my life, have been the kind of person who always puts my eggs in one basket. I applied to 2 schools, my reach school, which was Pitt, and then my safety school, which was UMass Amherst, and I was accepted into both, thankfully. But in high school, you know, and this kind of goes to why I picked ROTC, is I really knew what I wanted to study in high school. I read a book as a teenager about linguistics, and I was like, this is what I want to do. But I couldn't, in my research about what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to learn about linguistics, but there's not a real strong career path after getting a degree in linguistics, right? As a young science about like how language grows and develops, it's hard to picture what you're going to do aside from staying an academic for 20 years and calling that a career. So I was like, okay, I know what I want to study, but how am I going to get a job? So initially, ROTC and the Army was a path for me to have that personal discipline to work out every day, pay for school, and guarantee a job when I graduate so that I can have something on my resume, right? The original plan was do a couple years and get out, and coming up on my 10-year Armyversary, so we'll see how well that worked out. But yeah, the goal was guarantee a job after college and then have that be a base of which to get a career afterwards.
Okay. What book did you read that got you so interested? Because that's super interesting for just people. I mean, I took French in high school, didn't really fall in love with it. It wasn't until I got a scholarship to go through Project Go and learn Russian that I really was like, oh shit, foreign language is a thing. Like, that's really cool. Yeah.
So I read Wittgenstein, which he was a German philosopher, and he wrote a book about he trying to logically define what language is and how language works. So purely on the linguistic side of like, all right, in order to have a word, you have to have a picture or an idea of what an object is in order to be representative of the word, and it's a dense read. But one of the things, and people who've read the book say similarly, the last logical conclusion or the last line in the book is, where you can't talk, you must be silent. And that really sparked a curiosity of like, if you don't have a word for something, how can you think about it? So I wanted to study how language affects thoughts. And that led me to the language relativity hypothesis, which essentially in so many words is people think differently based on the language they speak. Right? And that was so interesting to me. Like, could you concoct a language that would be perfect for learning math? Right? Or could you make a language so that to make someone smarter? And if you've seen the movie Arrival, part of that movie has to do with the language relativity hypothesis, where she learns the alien language and it changes how she thinks so much that she can control time. Spoilers, so I'm sorry.
Damn, I didn't see that one, but that's super interesting. Yeah. So what language then, you get accepted to UPenn, or you're starting school there, what language did you start or focus on?
So I actually ended up being a double major, linguistics and Japanese. So I took Japanese all 4 years at Pitt, and not for any particular interest, aside from watching Dragon Ball Z growing up, but, I almost stumbled into it a little bit because I didn't sign up for classes until the first day of class. And so I went to my advisor and she's like, you have to take a foreign language. And at Pitt, it couldn't be the languages that are commonly taught at schools. So you couldn't take French, Spanish, Italian, or German and have it count as your foreign language. For linguistics, it would count as the university requirement, but it wouldn't count as part of your linguistics degree. So she was like, the only one that's open is Japanese. And I took it first 2 semesters, which was the minimum requirement, and I was like, I'm getting good grades, I'll just keep doing this. This is interesting and cool. So I ended up a double major, linguistics and Japanese.
Okay. Talking a little bit more about that, so, I mean, Japanese sounds like a very interesting language just because you have the kanji, and then it's completely different than like an English-based language, or not a Latin-based language.
Yeah.
How did you find that you were really good at it, studying it, or like how did you get such good enough grades to continue wanting to do it?
Yeah. So.
As an Asian language, it might seem so foreign or alien when you first start approaching it, but as a human language, right, there are certain roots that everything kind of goes back to. So one of the tenets in linguistics is, as a language gets more complicated in some ways, it has to get simpler in other ways. So the Hawaiian languages, they have a very simple sound system, but their words become super long because in order to distinguish between different words, you have to combine so many different sounds. So in one area it's simple, and in the other area it's complicated. For Japanese, the sounds are actually relatively simple because there are no sounds you make in Japanese that you don't already make in English, right? And minus some accenting. And the grammar is similar enough to English where you can make it work. Where in English we put the verbs with the subject of the sentence, so I ran. In Japanese, they just put the verbs at the end of the sentence, and then the subject is optional. So in Japanese, you would just say run, right? And the I would be assumed because I didn't mention anybody else. So once you learn a couple tricks or shorthands to make it sound good in English, you can pick up the structure of another language relatively quickly. That's what helped me, and practice every night. Practice.
Okay. What sort of, because we have a lot of different language learners here, what sort of tips helped you when you were practicing your language?
Listen to a native speaker, and repeat what they say and do that 50 times. Because we did, the book we were using had drills every night where you would practice a specific conversation between you and another person, and you would have to practice both rules. So me and my roommates, who were also Japanese majors, would just do that conversation over and over and over again until it was memorized. Right, so there's the memorization aspect. And then the drill aspect is, in the conversation, I ask you which way is the store, and you tell me the store's to the left. And then in the drill, I ask you which way is the store, which way is the library, which way is the bathroom, which way is, home. 10 different buildings, and you answer, it's to the left, it's to the right, it's to the center, it's forward, it's backwards. So that way, you've memorized the particular structure, and you've learned what words can plug into that structure.
Awesome. So, continuing with that, did you get any ability, or did you take like a Project Go or a CULP, or did you go anywhere?
Yeah. I didn't get on the Project Go application soon enough. I missed that window. But through Pitt, I did the Kakehashi project, which is just bridge. So we did a minor exchange with some Japanese students in Japan. So one summer I got to go to Japan, and then the next semester 4 or 5 of those same students came to Pitt, and we did that exchange that way. So that was a really awesome experience, and I traded the opportunity to go to airborne school for it, because I knew, hey, doing an immersive experience in another country is worth the 3 weeks of hanging out and jumping out of airplanes.
Definitely. What do you feel like is when you got there, your language got sharper, or were you already? So my biggest question is, could you survive just going there right from Pitt?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And a funny little anecdote about how it's changed. I haven't been at Pitt. I was doing 5 credit language courses every semester, and then traveled to Japan for 3 weeks for this immersive experience, right? In Japan, that first trip, I would talk to people in Japanese, and they would talk back to me in Japanese. Several years later, I went back to Japan, and I would talk to them in Japanese, and they would respond in English like, "Oh, let me help this guy out. He's trying.
Oh, man.
He's trying, but let me just. How can I help you?" So the lesson is, if you don't practice your foreign language, it's gonna degrade pretty quickly.
I know what you mean. Okay, moving on with that. Was that your sophomore year you got to do that?
Yes, I did. It was my sophomore year.
Okay, and then you prepared and went to advanced camp that next summer?
Yeah.
Okay. What was that experience like for you, sir?
Different. My advanced camp experience was probably very unique compared to lots of other people. So my year, it was the last year of LDAC, Leadership Development Assessment course, before it changed to CST, or Advanced Camp, Cadet Summer Training. But it was the first year at Fort Knox, and I was the last regiment of the first year at Fort Knox. The rumor was that the commanding general was threatened that if there were any more heat casualties, they were going to be fired, because we spent an extreme amount of time in the barracks, very little time in the field. The time in the field, and this was just the structure back then, was squad-based tactics. So we did a squad attack, a squad ambush, and a squad raid. Compared to today, where it's more complicated. They have to do platoon level tactics. But also, as a part of risk mitigation, we did land nav in groups. So there was very little individual assessment at my CST.
Okay. Did that factor into what job you were going to get?
A little. So it did. The OML breakdown, I'm not exactly sure what the OML breakdown was for what percentages compared to today, but what I do know is going into ROTC, right, just kind of like how I knew I wanted to do linguistics, I knew I wanted to do military intelligence. So I was doing everything I could to max out my points through ROTC, so that I was extremely high on the order of merit list. So being a Japanese major, because Japanese is a critical language, or a Category 5 language, right? It's the most difficult language in the Army's eyes to learn. So Japanese got me so many points because I did 5 credits every semester until I was a junior, which is when your accessions window stops. I had a 4.0 GPA up until I was a junior, right? And I was doing extracurricular activities, being a member of clubs, playing sports, doing all these things to bolster my OML rating, so that I did well at camp. I don't think I earned the highest grade, but I did well enough at camp. But I was still the top cadet in the program because of how well I was playing the game to boost the points in the other areas.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. So, when you got back from advanced camp, what was that? What was your final year like? Did you know you wanted to go active duty, things like that?
Yeah, so
I was aiming for active duty because the whole reason why I joined ROTC in the first place was to get a job. So I was like, what if I made it all this way and I still have to find a job after college? But I've told the cadets here, probably the hardest job I've had in my military career so far has been the Cadet Battalion XO at the Three Rivers Battalion, University of Pittsburgh. Because there's so many leadership challenges with career leadership, right? As a Cadet Battalion XO, you're in charge of the cadets on the staff, right? The commander, Cadet Witt, I think he's still in the Army. If he is, he's Captain Witt. But he set the training priorities. What are we going to do? The big picture kind of stuff. And then me as the XO, I had to run all the meetings, make sure everyone was on pace. The problem with being an XO in a cadet organization is I couldn't make people do anything, right? If I told someone to build an op order for a lab and they told me I have an exam that day, I can't do it, it's like, okay, I didn't have any recourse because everyone had so many things on their plate, and I didn't outrank anybody. I didn't have any more pull aside from just being the XO. So I had to learn leadership techniques of how to make people do the things that I needed to get done, while making sure it was done on time and the quality that we needed. So, difficult challenge.
Definitely. So, getting through your cadet time, when did you find out or that you were going to go active duty and intel? Was there any sort of an interview or anything?
No, for us, you just kind of filled out your list. We still had to put a combat arms in our top 3, and then you could opt in or not opt into branch detail. Looking at, I taught the MS3s, so I was very involved in their branching process. They have so many more options now, right? They rank their branches, they interview, they re-rank their branches, the branches come back and rank them. You have so much more control over your career. When it was my turn, I filled out a sheet, they scanned it into the computer, and then there wasn't even really a ceremony or anything. They called me into the office, and the master sergeant there was like, hey, you got intel, now we need to figure out what your duty station's going to be. We need to make a list. And I was like, intel, was I branch detail? Because I would branch detail infantry or armor. They were like, nope, straight intel. Now, where do you want to go? And I was like, right? So, I feel like today cadets have such a higher degree of control and say in where they're going to end up. And that's better for the Army because we get to pick people who want to be in that job, because I think what branch you get is going to determine how well you do in your career in so many different ways.
Totally. 1 second, I gotta do a camera check, sir.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, what did you put as your duty station then that you wanted to go?
So, number 1 on my list was Fort Irwin, California, because I didn't know anything. I was like, California.
California!
I put California, Italy, Japan, Colorado, right? The classic list of picking it based off the location over anything else. But thankfully, that same Master Sergeant who told me that I was intel, he was like, "Do you have family in California?" "No." "Well, you don't want to go here." And I was like, "Thank you, thank you so much." So I ended up, I put Italy, Germany, Korea, Japan, all in my top 5, but I ended up getting Fort Carson as my first duty station.
Nice. What was okay? So when did you find out? Was it before you even PCS'd?
Yeah. So
okay.
Because intel is it's a relatively short BOLIC, you get your orders before you go there, and your BOLIC, your initial officer training, is en route to your first duty station. So when I got there, my whole class, all those brand new lieutenants just like me, they all had orders, and some people were trying to trade orders, right? Like, "Hey, I'm going here.
Mm-hmm.
You want to swap?" So, yeah, I already knew as a cadet that I was going to go to Fort Carson before I even left.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was before I graduated. I think it was the fall semester before I graduated in 2015.
Nice. All right. So you graduated and commissioned. Was there any time before you left to go to BOLIC, or did you go right to it?
I was pretty rapid. But I think I commissioned in May, and then I went to BOLIC in July. So
okay.
went home, spent a month or two with my family, and then straight back out the door to Arizona, Fort Huachuca.
Okay. And was it PCS or TDY?
It was TDY. So
okay.
Fort Huachuca for 4-ish months, and then after that, so I went in July, graduated just after Thanksgiving, and then I went back to Japan that November, December, and then in December I went back and moved in at Fort Carson.
Okay. So what was BOLIC like? Getting to BOLIC, because now you're an intel officer. What are you doing there?
So lots of learning. I think BOLIC was a great opportunity to set the tone for how being in the Army was different from being in college, right? So the type of learning is very similar to being in a college class, right? You're going to sit down for an hour block, you're going to get lecture some, you're going to do some project work, maybe in a group or something. But when you're in college, on Monday you have class at 10, and then you have class at 2, and then Tuesday you might only have class at 11, right, or whatever. But at BOLIC it's the same kind of level of learning, but from PT in the morning, then class starts at 9:30, and then you're done at 4, right? So it was a great way to get your feet wet and understanding, like, oh, this is what a 9 to 5 really is like, right? For Intel BOLIC, it was a lot about how to make predictions, because Intel as a branch is the expert on the enemy, where an operational branch like infantry or armor or aviation, they're coming up with a plan about how to attack the hill or destroy the enemy or whatever their mission is. Intel comes in, and what Intel does is they try to describe how that plan could go wrong to make the plan better. So at Intel BOLIC, what we do is we're looking at, okay, how can we gain information so that we can tell the commander something that they don't know, and then how can we use that information to turn it into intelligence of a founded prediction that can make the plan better. A trap that a lot of people fall in, and it's just natural, being a human, is they want to win. So when they're playing the intel role, they're going to want to make the enemy plan so strong and so unbeatable. And usually the enemy plan comes after there's a rough draft of the friendly plan of what we're going to do. So because I want to win, I'm going to make the enemy so strong in the way that we're attacking. And I'm not thinking about how to make the plan better. I'm thinking about how do I win and show everyone how smart I am as the intel officer. So there's some humbling at BOLIC where they're intentionally trying to show you, like, hey, it's worth it to gather all the information you can to make a guess about what you think the enemy's going to do, but the goal isn't to tell the commander exactly what the enemy will do, because you can't know that. The goal is to make the friendly plan as good as it can be and know what to look for if you have to make a change.
Okay, can you delve a little bit more deep into that, as far as, what sort of things are you looking at to try to make like you said, the friendly plan as best as it possibly can? Are you looking at all the different intelligence sources that you have, like electronic, like? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the baseline is going to be the enemy capabilities, right? If I'm fighting against a tank formation, I want to know how far that tank can shoot, how far that tank can drive, and how close that tank needs to be to its refueling spot. Because those capabilities are generally going to be the same, right? I can learn those once and then update them as the enemy gets more equipment or different equipment. But that's kind of the baseline. Then on top of that, adding to the situation, what's the terrain telling the enemy to do? What's the weather telling the enemy to do? What's the enemy situation telling the enemy to do? If it's a tank formation, where are their current fuel locations located? Where are they? Because that dictates which ways they can and can't move, right? So that's kind of the baseline. What's the situation that we're dealing with? Usually, I'll do a rough draft of the plan just based solely off of that. So I understand, hey, in a perfect world with the given situation, how would I do it? But then we can get better than just that. We can use stuff like you were mentioning it, right? Electronic signatures of what the enemy's doing. We can use unmanned assets to get videos of maybe what the enemy's doing. Geospatial imagery, right? Satellite images, of, hey, was there disturbances of Earth that would be indicative of a tank driving in this area, right? So we gather more information to confirm or deny whether that base plan we have is what the enemy's going with, right? So we adjust that plan based off that.
Okay. And when you're in Bullock, are you also going through, this is what the different S shops do in a battalion?
Yeah. So there, I was cleaning through some computer files and I found some Bullock documents in there. So the first few weeks of Bullock, right, 4 to 6 weeks, was base level, and because Intel, it's more common to work on the battalion level. We learned about a basic battalion, right? So what is an infantry, armor, aviation, engineer, right? What are these different battalions structured like? What does the staff do? The different staff sections, who's in charge, and what's the command structure of the battalion? Then we went into a specific situation of, okay, now you're the battalion, we're dealing with this enemy, we're going to make a plan and deal with them that way. Then we took a break from that and did coin or counterinsurgency, which is primarily what we learned then was targeting and building an enemy network. And then after that we went back and revisited our battalion from the first section and built more on it as the situation changed over time. So it was really interesting, to give it a shot, learn more, and then revisit it after once you knew a little bit more what you were doing.
Okay. From what I understand, so you covered the basics of what these different battalions sort of work at. What is an intel officer generally doing once you get to your first unit?
Yeah, so my first unit was a little different. So I'll talk about my experience and then I'll go back to what an intel officer might do. So my first unit, I was attached to 71st Ordnance Group, which is a brigade level entity. There are two, and that's EOD. There are two EOD groups in the Army, 71st and 52nd. 71st covers all the EOD on the west side of the Mississippi. So we had a very large footprint of where all the different EOD battalions and companies were that we were managing. And as an intel officer there, as EOD teams, they're small teams with a very specialized mission. They are rotating constantly. We're talking 2015, 16, 17. They were rotating constantly to the Middle East, to Africa, to Asia, to South America. If a VIP is going somewhere, an EOD team is going to accompany them as part of their security detail and check that the route, hey, where would it be? Where would someone plant a bomb or anything like that? So because the the group constantly had teams going to different places, as the intel officer, I had to constantly develop products for all these different spots. So where we were just talking about in Bolek, I'm imagining just a single enemy battalion and what can I do against them. Now I'm imagining all the potential insurgent threats who would have bombs across the world, and I'm building specific products for the EOD teams there. So that was really it was really interesting work, because it was more technically based than I had learned in Bolek, where in Bolek it's, hey, what's the enemy going to do and how can we plan to defeat it? But with EOD it was, hey, what are the bombs the enemy is making and what are the ways that they would try to defeat someone who was trying to disarm it? So it's like the cat and mouse game. But after I spent time in EOD, I went to 1st Brigade, 4th ID, and that was a more, standard or traditional lieutenant experience, where what I was doing is generally we were working towards a large NTC rotation, so a huge training event. So every once in a while we do briefings on what the enemy there would do, but a lot of the time you're working on garrison things, inspecting the physical security, briefing the anti-terrorism situation, working on individual security clearances as they expire and need to be renewed, different things like that.
Okay. So, are you an AS2 when you were at the brigade level, or what? And then how many intel officers were you working with? Is it like a cell? Like how is that?
Yeah. So in 4th ID, I was at the brigade level. So there were 9 lieutenants and 2 to 3 captains and a major who was in charge at the brigade level.
So you said you're making products, but are you also traveling with those different units, or is it just you? Like, hey, this is where they are going. You need to make the product for where they go. Or...
Yeah. So with EOD, I was stay at Fort Carson for the most part, and assist them wherever they were in the world, because frequently there'd be multiple teams in different spots at the same time. So I'm supporting the team that's doing concurrent training with the Thai army in Thailand, and I'm supporting a team that's in Iraq or wherever else.
Wow. Did you have a choice, or did you get to the brigade, getting to Fort Carson, and say, hey, you're going to go here. Like, this is how this is going to work.
So, my initial orders had me going to the Warrior Support Battalion, which, the Warrior Support Battalion is where injured people go to do rehab as they transition out of the military. So, I think the S1 at 71st Ordnance Group was like, hey, here's an incoming lieutenant, we can snag him because they don't need him at the Warrior Support Battalion. So I didn't really have a say in that first unit, but as I was coming up, I did a deployment with EOD. I was coming up to about 2 years with them. They were like, hey, this would be better for you to expand your horizons and to possibly take a platoon leadership position if you went to 4th ID. So that I had a little say in going to 4th ID.
Nice. And then what was your experience in 4th ID as a AS2, right? You're in a shop, an S2 shop now?
It was interesting. So I definitely, in a couple ways, got thrown into the fire, where I had just gotten back from a 9-month deployment in November. I did my post-deployment leave, some rest and recuperation, and then I went to 4th ID in January of 2018. I showed up on a Wednesday after New Year's, and we were on the buses to NTC on Friday. And then we deployed again that summer. So I had a very quick turnaround, straight back into the fire of that was stressful, but I don't think that was the unit's fault. You know what I mean? So
it's how things just line up. The craziness sometimes. Yeah. Okay. I got